Have you ever had that feeling, that worry in the back of your mind that your child isn't getting all the support they need to really succeed in school? If that sounds familiar, then this is for you. We're about to dive into a powerful federal law called Section 504. And let me tell you, it's not just more paperwork. It's a civil right, a tool that can absolutely change your child's entire experience at school. So let's get into it. So let's start with that big question, right? Does your child need a little extra support to truly thrive and not just get by in school? If you've been asking yourself that question, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to walk through this together and help you find some answers. Okay, here's our game plan. We've got this broken down into 5 simple parts. First, we'll cover what Section 504 even is. Then, we'll figure out who qualifies. Next, we'll clear up the confusion between a 504 plan and an IEP. After that, I'll give you the exact steps to get a plan. And finally, and this is so important, we'll talk about how to protect your child's rights. This is your complete roadmap. So let's start with the big picture. What exactly is Section 504? A lot of people think it's just another education program, but it's not. It's actually a federal civil rights law that comes from the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. You know what its job is? To stop discrimination and make sure that students with disabilities get the same access to education as everyone else. I know, that's a whole lot of legal language right there, but just look at how powerful it is. Basically, it says that any school that gets money from the federal government, and that's pretty much every public school, cannot, under any circumstances, discriminate against a student just because they have a disability. The key word to remember here is access. It's all about opening doors for our kids. Now, this law guarantees something with a kind of clunky name but a really critical mission. FAPE, which stands for a free, appropriate public education. Under Section 504, appropriate doesn't mean the absolute best education money can buy. It means an education where your child's needs are met just as adequately as the needs of their peers. You see? It's all about leveling the playing field. Okay, so this brings us to the question I know is on every parent's mind. Does my child actually qualify? Well, the definition of disability under this law is way, way broader than most people realize. So let's break down what it really means. So check this out. There are actually 3 different ways a child can qualify for protection. The first one is what we usually think of, having an impairment that significantly limits a major life activity. But there are 2 other ways. A child can also qualify if they have a history of an impairment. Think of a student who is in remission from cancer. Or they can qualify if the school simply treats them as if they have a disability. And the best part? Your child only needs to meet one of these 3 criteria. Now, I need you to lean in for this part because it's huge. Back in 2008, a law called the ADA Amendments Act was passed, and it was an absolute game changer. This law basically forced schools to think about disability in a much, much broader way, making it easier for so many more kids to get the support they deserve. It was a massive victory for families everywhere. So why was this act such a big deal? Well, a few huge reasons. First, it flat out says the definition of disability must be broad. Second, and this is the one you really need to remember, it says schools are not allowed to consider mitigating measures, things like medication or an inhaler, when they're deciding if a child qualifies. The question is how the disability affects your child without those supports. And finally, it officially added things like concentrating, reading, and thinking to the list of major life activities. This is precisely why kids with ADHD, dyslexia, or even severe food allergies now clearly qualify for a 504 plan. All right, let's tackle one of the biggest points of confusion for parents, the 504 plan versus an IEP. What in the world is the difference? They sound similar, but they do very different things, and knowing which path is right for your child is absolutely crucial. This table really lays it all out. The number one difference is the law behind them. Remember how we said Section 504 is a civil rights law? It's all about access. An IEP, on the other hand, comes from a different law, an education law, and it's all about providing specialized instruction. Think of it this way. A student might be brilliant and not need a different curriculum, but maybe they need extra time on tests to access that curriculum fairly. That's the perfect job for a 504 plan. Okay, so you're thinking a 504 plan sounds like the right path for your child. Now what? How do you actually make it happen? Let's get practical and walk through the exact steps you can take starting today. The very first, most critical step is to put your request for an evaluation in writing. An email or a letter to the school principal or the 504 coordinator is perfect. You want to be clear about your concerns and make sure you mention the major life activities you think are being impacted. The school then needs your permission to evaluate. After that, a team, which absolutely should include you, will get together, look at all the info, and if your child is eligible, you'll build that plan together. So, what does a 504 plan actually do? It provides accommodations. Now, these aren't about changing what your child learns, it's all about changing how they learn it. So, for a kid with ADHD, that might mean sitting closer to the teacher or getting more time on tests. For a student with dyslexia, it could be getting to use audiobooks. See? There's simple changes that just remove the barriers so your child can show what they know. We've covered a ton of ground, but this last section is so important. Because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. And knowing your legal rights as a parent is the single most powerful tool you have if you ever hit a roadblock with the school. This is the question that keeps a lot of parents up at night, right? What happens if the school says no to an evaluation, or they decide your child isn't eligible? Or what if they create a plan, but then just don't follow it? Well, the law gives you real options. You are not stuck. These are called your procedural safeguards, and you can think of them as your advocacy toolkit. The school has to tell you about their decisions. You always have the right to see your child's records, and if you disagree, you can ask for a formal hearing. But there's another really powerful option. You can file a complaint directly with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, also known as the OCR. Filing a complaint with the OCR probably sounds really intimidating, but it's more straightforward than you might think. The most important thing to remember is the deadline. You usually have 180 days from when the discrimination happened. You can file it right online, and you just need to explain clearly what happened. It's a free and powerful way for parents to make sure the school is following the law. So there you have it. We've covered the what, the why, and the how of Section 504. It's everything from a powerful civil right all the way down to a practical plan to help your kids shine. So the only real question left is the one on the screen. Now that you know your rights, what's your first step going to be?